Great to see you all for a topic that I think we've all been spending a lot of time talking about, and I hope you can shed some light on it because I find so much hype around AI, and maybe we should just get rid of that term straight away, but we'll talk about that. I think we can all agree that this is an absolutely fascinating time. We all see such incredible potential, and there is such hype. And so I'm hoping at the end of 38 minutes we have to talk about this. We're going to shed a bit of light on it. Just a little, quick word on my perspective. So I came to Silicon Valley 15 years or so ago. When I first came here, I can distinctly remember, everyone was talking about data-driven companies, the data-driven enterprise. And there were like three that we in the media talked about. There was Capital One, and there was Harrah's, and there were, a couple of others. And these were companies that had, really set out from the beginning to re-engineer a lot of their processes around, collecting a lot more data and applying analytics and actually getting some massive competitive advantage. And they were really seen as disruptors in their industry. They were actually gonna kick butt in whatever sectors they were in. And, we look back now, and Capital One didn't quite work out. I think they blew up a few years ago with some of the data analysis around fraud. But, so you fast forward to now, and everybody is meant to be a data-driven company. And I was very taken, I don't know how many of you read it, but it's definitely worth reading. I was very taken by the Reuters story this week about Amazon's use of machine learning in its HR department. Everybody uses uses some kind of screening in HR now because there's no other way of handling all those applications. Amazon set out to screen. Guess what? It found that its algorithms are screening out all the women. No surprise here. They applied because they trained this algorithm on their own data being the people they'd found successful in their organization. And guess what? They were all men. So the algorithm found clever ways of identifying women. Particularly if they come from an all-women college, and then they got screened out. So Amazon ended up just junking that algorithm. They couldn't do anything with it. So I think that, for me, is where we are, that there's tremendous potential. I'm not going to predict an AI winter, because I think that's obviously way overblown. But I do think there's a real risk here that we won't get all the benefits that we're hoping for. So anyway, with that, let me throw this open, and I'm going to start with Ali at the end there. So let's start with the opportunities here, where the real kind of low-hanging fruit is, or where the real gains are going to be made by businesses applying today's AI tools. Ali, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so I kind of disagree a little bit with the background, to be honest. The way I see it is, I see it from the inside. I call it boring AI. It's not the sexy self-driving cars. It's everywhere, in every large enterprise, in every vertical. It's going to have massive impact, and I see it. For instance, you go to hotels.com or Expedia right now, the algorithms that we have, basically the listing of the pictures that you get and the exact pictures they pick was trained machine learning algorithms on Databricks. And they sometimes do A/B testing and turn that off, and it has significant revenue impact for them, right? Bechtel, the billion-dollar projects that they do construction, the sequencing of which order to build things, they switched away from having humans just build it the way they want to using machine learning to determine exactly the sequencing. And it's between $10 to $100 million savings in the ordering and how you build these things, right? I could go on all day just talking about these use cases, but this is what I call boring AI. Those were boring examples. They are having such immense impact on these industries that we're just scratching the beginning. That's my sort of
boring AI. Boring AI is good. There's no problem with boring here. Walter.
I like that perspective. To me, initially when we talked about this panel, there's AI in the workplace, and there's like which jobs is it going to replace? Like that's not what you're talking about, right? The boring AI that will make a certain product or business process better in the detail. I think we already see a lot of, and we'll see a lot more of. Our perspective on it is, how do you then surface that? How do you connect different types of technologies that are emerging in the enterprise, particularly with the employees themselves? So the purpose of Workplace in all this is that we help employees not just connect with each other, but sort through information. We're all suffering from huge information overload, where in your personal life, Facebook has had an opportunity just in newsfeed by ranking the stories that go on in your personal life by relevance, kind of helping you kind of signal, helping you divide the signal and the noise. In the workplace, we have a similar need. But way beyond that, we see technologies come up everywhere in SaaS, have fantastic use cases and utility, but you need to have employees find a way to connect with those, make sense of them, and ideally connect them together in a process that I'm happy to give examples on.
Joy.
Look, I think enterprises used AI in a limited way for the longest time. You have companies like SAS, right, who used, that's what data scientists use. The challenge is that they always used to have is that those tools just did not scale or could not provide the answers that the enterprises looked at or wanted. I think the fact that now you have such, the cloud gives you the opportunity to kind of now use these compute resources to be able to actually get all the data that's there and actually drive decisions and, actually get some visibility and ideas about how to run the business. I think that's why AI now, the boring AI that Ali talked about is taking hold in all these enterprises. But I think enterprises have tried to use AI all along, right? It's not a new phenomenon.
Right. Well, let's dig down into some of the kind of the business case for this. And productivity, Ali, you talked about productivity, Malta, too. So it seems that a lot of the drive is about, well, we'll get to the replacing people part of it in a minute, but a lot of it is about costs. What are the real benefits, both in, well, let's start with the office and how you make people more productive, because we've all seen chatbots. We've heard about chatbots. A couple of years ago, we heard a lot about chatbots and they didn't really work that well. But how are these tools going to make people more productive?
I'll give you a very basic example. When I'll be back at the office later in the afternoon, I have to interview some candidates. We have a chatbot which does one thing, and you can think of it as almost the most basic notification. A half hour prior to the interview, it will ping me on Workplace and will say, Malta, you need to go to this room at that time. You will meet this candidate, here's the name, and this is the job you're interviewing them for. Do you want to see their CV? Do you need to see the job spec? Has saved my life millions of times when otherwise I'd be running to a conference room saying, like, who is it again that I'm speaking to, and like, which job was this for? So I think the challenge with chatbots in consumer applications has been to narrow down a use case that people still find valuable, which in the enterprise is a lot simpler. We have a similar chatbot that will just simply ping me when a visitor arrives at the lobby. Super relevant in that moment, not a very expensive use case. So we don't, to contrast this, we don't have like an office chatbot that can kind of to help you do anything in the office. It's too complex. But in the enterprise, you can narrow things down. To spin this a bit further and show, I think, where this is going, is an example from PwC, who are building an onboarding solution on Workplace that they've just been piloting. That goes beyond the very simple interaction, but it's still a very structured flow. If you think about what a new employee at your company goes through when they join, there are plenty of administrative tasks that they need to do, from your benefits, kind of from legal information, from like knowing where they need to show up at work, in which building, they need IT equipment, everything. All those are different systems, disconnected processes. Terrible experience typically for an employee joining. So you can now use new digital services, Workplace being one, to structure that workflow, which, by the way, is different when a person joins in sales or in finance, or as a junior employee, as a senior employee. And you can build those workflows in a seamless, integrated way, because you have new digital services that employees can actually know how to use that connect all these things. We can talk about the application of AI and that later. That will come. There's a very basic one that when employees today give feedback to this process, they can there's check-ins with the employees alongside the onboarding. Mm-hmm. They can write a comment. PwC uses an API with AI to tell you what the sentiment of that comment was. Was it a positive, negative comment? They're beginning to see those kind of boring, I like the term, boring AI pieces help those processes. But I would say we're far from just having something that's magically automated and just working.
Yeah. Ali, what do you think the main productivity benefits are from your customers, what you're seeing?
I mean, it's massive everywhere, but I think if I just go back to the boring AI part, basically what's happening is I think there's a few companies, 1% of the companies out there that are actually extremely successful with AI. Facebook is one of them, right? What these guys have done is they've taken the whole social network of Facebook, compressed it down, built custom systems where they've put that data, and they can do very easily any machine learning they want and predictions and AI on it, okay? Twitter is taking the whole tweet stream, built custom systems, compressed it down, and they can do machine learning on that really well. Google is taking the whole World Wide Web, all the images, everything that's in it. They've built custom systems, and they can now do machine learning on it really, really well, okay? The rest of Fortune 2000, they have not done that with their data sets. So their data is spread out in various data warehouses. It's in this system. It's locked down there. It's siloed there. It's in some Excel sheet over here. They can't do this kind of AI that Facebook, Google, Twitter, these companies are doing. But there's massive productivity gains if they could unlock that data, right? So that's what I call boring AI is I think this, and the newspapers are not writing about this because those are not the chatbots, which I think chatbots are awesome. Self-driving cars are awesome. Alexa is awesome. But there's all these other, all the data that the large enterprises have, thousands of use cases for each one large enterprise. And those data sets aren't, they didn't build the custom system to be able to do machine learning on it. Yeah. So our mission is how do we help those guys to catch up, to be able to do the kind of things that Facebook today can do.
Yeah. Well, let's go on and talk about some of those things later. But yeah,
I would add or kind of disagree that I think people are using AI or whatever machine learning in limited ways, yes, right? I think the infrastructure wasn't there. What Databricks provide wasn't there, and I think now people are kind of finding that hey, like you have all these BI and analytics tools, right? They kind of all give you visibility into what's going on in your previously, right? In the past. They don't give you visibility and predict in the future. And this is where people are now taking all these tools because the infrastructure and, and companies like yours, like providing, ability for, people to now actually take all the data and start predicting, figuring out, what can be done. But, like in fraud, in like trying to figure out through healthcare, premiums, things like that, or the hotels.com, people are doing it. And I would bet that if you poll all the CIOs here, they would all say that they have projects, that have been going on, maybe not very successful, but they have been trying to use AI and machine learning to kind of, make their employees more productive and, and get to revenue then or bring down costs.
Let's go back to looking at, some of these technologies and how advanced they are, whether our expectations of them are getting ahead of themselves. And I think, chatbots was an interesting example when it came along because expectations got ahead. But to me, that points to a deeper question, which is language understanding and conversation, where we're seeing more and more systems that seem to rely on being able to understand language and then being able to engage people in some form of interaction. And I was very interested, Malte, by your examples there because you're starting with very simple automation of processes. And then you're going to try and layer in that kind of language understanding and more interaction, more conversation later. But this is a very difficult problem, isn't it? Do you think we're going to see that kind of technology really work inside offices and businesses?
I personally think we will. I often think, though, it's a design challenge, like a more user interaction challenge at the beginning. Right. Because there's if you, in this example of a new employee joining, if you want to understand how well they're doing, and so that you can give feedback to the manager or change your process, yes, you can just ask an open-ended question and have someone type, which faces you with a challenge of needing to analyze the sentiment of that comment, or you can frankly just give them a thumbs up, a thumbs down button, or a scale from 1 to 5. So sometimes I think people are not quite designing those experiences right, but there are very valuable applications of sentiment analysis. One that's related is, say, in call centers, right? If you can have even a real-time analysis of an interaction, whether it's live on the phone and you do a voice analysis, or you have any written text that you can analyze, and you can analyze the sentiment while that interaction is happening instead of routing someone to a "how was your experience?" After the call. You get a much richer data set. You can therefore collect more data on the employee. You can coach them better. So I do think there is plenty of applications that we are seeing in this area that are developing quite rapidly and quite well. One last one, think about translations of how they have come along. Right? Like there's lots of data sets again in Google and Facebook where we're doing translations today already on a very, very high quality level. So I think it's like a similar problem to the sentiment analysis. So that capability has grown tremendously.
Yeah.
No, I think the voice interface is going like, I see my kids, they are 13 and 11, they interact with everything through voice. Right? They were like so excited when Siri came on their laptops, right? Because they could use Siri on their phones, on their iPad, they couldn't use it on their laptop. And they use Google Home, and Alexa kind of like all the time, right? That's how they interact. They want the TVs to be driven by. So I think, the interface, because that's a much more natural interface to access data, to do your work, than what we do, which is type and look at a screen.
Voice is fascinating, isn't it? Because it is obviously one of those consumerization of technology kind of stories. We know it's going to get into the office and the workplace somehow, sometime. But at the moment, it seems to me we're seeing tech companies trying to force it into the office. All of us with an Echo or a device sitting on our desk that occasionally speak up know that is obviously not the way. I was talking to Amazon about this recently, and so Amazon have a number of case studies of how Alexa really works in the office. One of their case studies is WeWork, which allegedly uses it for booking conference rooms and other things. When I talked to the chief product officer at WeWork, his answer was, well, no, we're not very interested in that. That's like, I've deprioritized it, it's at the bottom of the queue. And I think that's kind of how voice is at the moment. It's tantalizing, it's interesting, but very hard to see the real kind of application right now.
I think it's always a good idea to ask the customers, not the vendors. But like trying to then articulate some of these trends from a customer's perspective, and one of CIOs of like how do you actually enable your organization to consume more digital products? The main thing of why we're building Workplace is because it's a surface that people understand. I'm not going to turn this into a pitch, but the key challenge that you're facing is you have employees that you need to enable to work with new digital systems that are rising. And so what our customers are finding is that you can give Workplace on a phone to a truck driver at XPO, a logistics company.
Yeah.
But we're not building products for office workers only anymore. The consumerization of IT that you're talking about in enterprise software, and you'll hear the same from, I'm sure, Aaron at Box, where the key trick is to make the software so intuitive that it works for anybody. You can be a Starbucks barista, or you can be a Walmart store employee. Like we need a way to engage these people in this new digital revolution of all the systems that we're building.
Yeah, Ali.
I love voice. I love natural language processing, chatbots, all that. It's all great, self-driving cars. I just want to say Databricks, less than 15% of our use cases have anything to do with voice, anything to do with natural language processing, and anything to do with images. And we're doing AI for all the other use cases as well, right? So I'm just saying I think the most amount of money and the most amount of automation is going to be in the untapped data sources that large enterprises have that can be automated using quite basic machine learning techniques, not very advanced, which doesn't, those are awesome things.
But I think those are two orthogonal things, right? Yep. I think the most of the processing will be done, but somebody will figure out how to do the voice interface best, right? And then and everybody will kind of use that, right? Definitely. So the paradigm of, I agree with you, right? Yeah. Most of the stuff that the enterprise are going to do has nothing to do with voice. They might have a voice interface for their applications, which will be, they'll get it. What's that?
It'll be commoditized.
Exactly.
And work very well.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the productivity question. And I think everybody now kind of accepts that, yes, jobs will be lost, but more importantly, there will be a lot of change and a lot of churn in the workforce. There'll be a lot of new jobs created, and a lot of existing jobs will change dramatically. I've talked around a lot about this last year, and I guess the consensus I was getting from people generally was, for every 5 jobs going, maybe 3 will be created. And maybe those 3, maybe one of them will be, or 2 of them will be from people who were amongst the 5 to lose their jobs. But there'll be new skills as well, and so 1 or 2 of those jobs will be entirely new. So this is huge churn. It's huge churn in the workforce, and it seems that it's a management challenge more than anything. So how do you see that playing out in the companies that you work with? How well? For a start, is that the kind of analysis that you're seeing? And if so, how are people going about it? How are they managing that change?
Maybe I can quickly just say this. I only see one side of the equation. People talk a lot about jobs disappearing. I just want to say the customers I talk to, I ask them, hey, what kind of software can I build for you? And they say, I don't even need software. Help me find data scientists, please. Help me find machine learning people. Where can I hire them? Do you know anyone? Can you help me with this, right? So there's this huge demand to get these people. I also happen to be on the Berkeley faculty. And every student now coming into the grad school program at Berkeley now wants to do machine learning AI. It's to the extent that now the existing professors, the professors in networking say, hey, I do intelligent networks. And the database professors say, I do intelligent databases. And the operating system guys say, we do, intelligent systems is my, because every student wants to be a data scientist, machine learning. So there is a big change happening, but there's also huge demand, and we can't satisfy that huge demand for data scientists that's out there. Just want to show that other side of the equation too. That's one side.
That's the 1 job in 5. That's the one new job, right?
No, but look, the unemployment rates are down at 3.5% or 3.7%, right? So it's like all our portfolio companies can't find, it doesn't matter, marketing person, engineers, product manager, everything. So the trend, it has nothing to do with AI. The trend is that, look, if you're not well educated, if you don't have a college degree, you're just going to have a hard time finding a job. And I think AI, all it's doing is, helping these people become more productive, right? It's not about taking jobs, right? And that's what people need. So if you're, well educated, I don't think you have to worry about your job disappearing. You kind of, you'll find something else to do. It's really, I think, and also I think Chris before us talked about all of these other industries, right? Like trucking and manufacturing, where nobody really wants to go to, and that's where a lot of these AI, or robots can really help.
I guess I'm thinking more about the question of actually implementing these things, where it does bring huge cultural change and changing work processes. It does displace people and will be seen inside companies as a cost-cutting measure. I mean, that's just the way of the world. And that will slow the uptake of a technology that I think a lot of companies think will be beneficial. Maybe it won't slow it, but it'll add to the tension and the stress. And so I just wonder how companies go about that in the best way.
I was thinking about this question before the panel and looked at some airlines and their employee stats, right? You will see lots of like self-check-in kiosks now and all those kind of things. Yeah, I can't see in the data, even while those kind of companies have been at this for some time, I can't see in the data that their employee base is shrinking. I think what you do is you leverage the productivity gains and you invest in other areas, right? It may reduce your cost for the flight. You have more people traveling, therefore. You may be able to offer a better, more personalized service when you don't need to have the employees can check in bags. Not an airline expert, but I think you need to see those shifts in a broader context. It's not just that like one specific job may no longer be there, and therefore you have millions of people suddenly be unemployed. Again, I do think we are underestimating what we can actually how we can develop employees when we first of all connect them in better ways. Right? I think the opportunity you give to employees that you have, or that in some ways the opportunity that you don't give to people that you already have by like not giving them access to great tools is crazy. So giving people a chance to develop and contribute in different ways, I think will way overcompensate kind of the issue of like small tasks going away.
And and I also think that enterprises will realize that it's so hard to hire people in an environment like that. Instead of laying them off, or hopefully you can use technology to actually train people to do something else that they have the aptitude to do within the same enterprise, right? So I think these are all things that will work out, over the next few years.
Ali.
Well, I'm just going to say one sentence. I thought about should I say it or not. I do think boring AI is replacing boring jobs. Is that so bad?
Unless you're the one having that boring job.
How are you defining boring jobs?
Well, it's, the AI technologies are not that advanced. AI really shines when you have a very repetitive, well-formulated problem that it can solve, right? Go solve chess for me. But if you say, hey, get on the panel here and discuss the future of AI, no AI, there's nothing that can help with that, right? So it's replacing the very, monotonous, very repetitive kind of things. That's what it's replacing. The way I would look at it is it's not hurting education. It's actually helping education on the planet. It's not bringing food scarcity. It's helping that too, right? Yeah. It's not, the resources on the planet are not reduced by AI. So in some sense, it's just automating some of the things that, should be automated. Sure. And by the way, that's been going on for 300 years.
We're going to open this up to questions in a moment. I just want to deal with one question before we do, which is the implementation question, Ali, very much that you addressed, which is, we had a few years where everyone was told big data was the thing. Collect all your data, break down the silos. Now we're in, the period of machine learning. We'll do something with this. Obviously, this is difficult. Partly because companies lack the skills. Partly because just the technology, building the platforms for this. So without making a sales pitch, what do you see inside companies that is the hardest challenge for making this work? Ali.
Sure. For me, it's very simple. It's actually, you have to have, it starts with the data. So I don't think we've actually solved the data problems yet. You need to, basically what happened is AI has existed for 40, 50 years. Yeah. It's gone through 3 winters, failed 3 times, right? And we didn't actually come up with any new algorithm in the last 10, 20 years. Nothing new happened. There's no new algorithm, literally, right? People are using still algorithms from 1970s. So what changed now? What's changed is basically Google figured out that if you take massive amounts of data and apply the 70s old algorithms from the textbooks on it, you can actually start getting fantastic results, okay? So the trick that Google basically figured out, and Facebook is doing very cleverly and everyone else, is combining the data with the old machine learning algorithms. So in the implementation, the challenges that the big enterprises are seeing is how can they combine the existing data sets that they have that are locked down in various places, they're still siloed. That still remains the big problem. How can they get that out and start doing machine learning on it? So it's the combination of data and AI. That's the main challenge.
By the way, if you ask a data scientist, they will say that's the most boring part of their job.
Yeah.
I don't know how data scientists are here, but they say that the munging the data, the prepping the data, they spend 70% of their time, and they hate it.
And we haven't figured out how to automate that part. So that's still huge manual labor that the data scientists are going through today.
Well, now Google will tell us that they are automating that, and that AI in the cloud, machine learning in the cloud, you can come and plug into Google now. Are they going to solve this first?
I don't think so.
But I think that's different. But if you offer it as a service and you can plug other data sources in, that's great. I mean, so I feel kind of going back to your examples of like challenging which jobs are going away. There are plenty of boring tasks that people would love to get rid of because they can focus on the more interesting ones. I was thinking of S&P coming in. When you have an expense report in Concur where you no longer need to classify the receipt image because the image is automatically recognized, doesn't mean that the job of all our admins goes away.
One person's boring task is another person's paycheck.
I disagree with that. My point
I
is
don't want to be cynical. I do agree with you that that automation is a wonderful thing.
But the role of an admin is not going away only because you've made it like half as hard to file an expense report. I'd love more support on like how to structure my week, how to prepare for my meetings. The expense reporting is like not that helpful.
To Ali's point, though, I'll just add last thing. Actually, a lot of these boring jobs actually were all outsourced in different countries, right? And I think that's if you look at it, some of the RPA players, that robotic process automation, they're basically displacing jobs not in the U.S. but like in Philippines and India, right? And that's a boring task already. Like, if you are doing this expense report in a big enterprise, that's probably shipped off to somewhere outside the US. Yeah. And so those are probably, that's where, you'll see that more of these boring tasks which are being done outside the US are probably going to disappear.
Yeah, there was a very interesting McKinsey report last year that did raise that question of what the impact of this will be on developing economies. I mean, they're the ones that could suffer the most.
That's right.
Could be, anyway, let's open this up and, please show your hands. There are some microphones going around. And it's a pretty broad topic, so I'm sure we can take anything. There's one there.
Right. Hi. I have a question probably for Ali. So we are talking about the untapped enterprise data, and we are talking about like the data set that we can send through the machine learning or AI. Do you have any strategies or recommendations how to basically store and create this data set? I know that we are creating lots of data and lots of data sets, but I'm pretty sure there must be some kind of recommendations how to do this in the right way so the data sets can be more easily consumable by this algorithm. And my second question would be, is we can of course build some good solutions for our products and ideas how to make more revenue, like you mentioned in the beginning with Expedia, kind of training the models to pick the right picture when I'm building my feed from the results. Do you have any recommendations how the business owners or the product owners should change their mindsets to think about what are all the possibilities I can achieve with the right algorithms, with the right data sets? Because I guess there are many...
Can we keep the questions
Cool,
short?
okay.
Because we need to pack it.
I guess, okay.
Yeah.
I can keep it right there.
Was that for me?
Ali.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go fast. Well, obviously, I think you should buy Databricks. And I absolutely mean it, by the way. So it's pretty simple. I think that what's happening in the big, large enterprises is that IT owns the data sets, and they're the ones that need it to be secure and reliable, and they own it, but they don't actually understand the AI problems. The AI problems, the people who understand best the automation that can happen is line of business that's closest to the products, that's closest to the customer. And that's what we're seeing this big, that's why large enterprises are struggling to some extent with getting AI working. So I think you need to bring those two together. I know a lot of different techniques you can use for that. It's good to have a chief data officer that owns both sides of the house instead of having it be siloed in IT and line of business. It's good to have a center of excellence if you can have that, where they can get together all the people that need to work on the data and the AI problems together. The successful companies set up these center of excellences. They have chief data officers. So they try to consolidate and bring people together, and also make sure that the people that are closest to your customers or closest to the products you're building, those that understand the problems, they usually have ideas on what can be automated, but they don't necessarily have the data scientists, nor do they have access to the data sets that is in the back end of the sort of enterprise. So that would be my suggestion. How can you bring these technologies together? By Databricks. It's literally addresses this problem. Sorry for the pitch, but it's just.
All right, one and just here.
Hi, I think during the discussion you talked a little bit about education. So one of my questions is, what do you see as the disruption of the traditional college education in this process, both in what people actually need to be trained for in the workplace, but also in traditional degrees that may be partially automated by AI in the future, and changing our requirements, therefore, as employers and what we look for?
I can take a stab at it, and I really think that, look, you cannot train a person to be a developer or an AI person or data scientist in college, right? You really have to train them to do critical thinking. You kind of have to make them logical, understand logic, reason, things like that. And I think ultimately you have to teach them how to have grit and persistence, because that's what you need to be successful in your career and in your personal life. So I think there are all of these trends that, okay, we are going to make you don't go to college, just learn how to do JavaScript or whatever. I think fundamentally that is not right, because a lot of the boring computing tasks, which a lot of these developers are going to get automated in the near future, right? So, and then what you do? So I think in some ways education and college has to be all about, hey, how do I keep learning and keep changing, because the trends is all going to be very different than what it is today.
Go on, please.
I think education can become much better in terms of the data that you capture throughout the education process, and therefore you tailor your education better, you performance manage it better. I think at the same time, we can't expect all people and normal people to become computer scientists and geeks. So I think technology, to the largest extent, needs to kind of better meet people where they are, and needs to become more user-friendly for people, is how I think about it.
So I got my college degree in the 2000s, and I teach now at Berkeley, and the way the kids learn these days is completely different from when I learned, and that's not that long ago, like 20 years ago. It's completely being disrupted. Massive online courses, electronic books online, and then Confucius said you learn by doing. There's all these now automated test-taking things where you online code, it gives you the results, it tries to do that. So it's being hugely disrupted and democratized worldwide. You can have a kid in a poor state somewhere in the third world, take a MOOC from MIT, and do the coding assignments online and learn and become the best person at AI. They would not have that opportunity. When I grew up, I had to go to the library and get books, and so it's a massive disruption happening to the universities, and they're aware of it. So.
All right, do you see another one? I want to squeeze in a very last question myself. Where does competitive advantage come from in this field? You always think with a new technology, if everybody has it, where's the real competitive advantage people are going to get? As you said, Ali, nothing new in the algorithms. Everybody has access to the same algorithms. We hear more and more it's about the data. It's all about your data. But is it more about the work processes? Because the companies that can actually get value out of their data, we all assume that everybody's data about their customers is valuable. Everybody has a valuable data set if they can use it. But it's more about, can you actually develop the learning processes to make use of that? Seems to me, but what do you think? Where is the competitive advantage to companies there?
For me, you nailed it. It's the data. I'll give you an example. You asked, can Google do this? Can Facebook do it? They're not going to solve all these problems. I'll tell you why. One of our biggest customers is NHS in the UK, right? They have 80 million patients, electronic medical records. They even have the DNA of a bunch of these guys. That's massive leverage. Google doesn't have that data set. No one else has it, so it's the data.
It's hard to disagree with that. You can take it one step further. Why do the competitors in a specific field, why does one of them have more data, one less data? I think that's, at the end of the day, about how forward-thinking you are, kind of what people you have in your company, and how you're making this a priority. I think that's up to leaders in those companies in the industry to prioritize these. You have lots of decisions you make every day in terms of what you set as your strategy, where you invest your resources. It's available to everybody. Everybody can hit up Ali after this panel and get support on it. The question is who actually prioritizes that and does that and is innovative. That's a leadership challenge.
No, but as an investor, we look for companies that have a lot of access to data. Like we're an investor in 23andMe, right? They have a great business acquiring, the DNA data, but ultimately they could potentially use that for, discovering drugs, right? So that's the beauty. If you look at it, that's what Google is, right? And that's why Google and Alexa are all out there with their voice thing, because they are collecting data. Google even has this thing where, you kind of have kids draw and the Google tries to tell you what you drew, right? And they are basically collecting data in a crowdsourced way to understand, what shapes matches with what. So ultimately, enterprise will have to realize that the data that they have about, their customer, that is going to be what their competitive advantage is going to be, right?
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.